I know some of you. I just graduated in May. So pretty new experience for me being out of nursing school. But I'm originally from the Bay Area, California, and I originally was planning on working in California. And specifically, I was looking at like labor and delivery in the Bay Area. I eventually ended up switching gears. I start my job actually a week from yesterday in the emergency department. And I'm actually living and working in Fort Collins, Colorado. So it's like northern Colorado region. Um, I wanted to be back on the West Coast after going to school on the East Coast. Um, I had lived in Colorado last summer and I really love it. I would love to talk to anyone about what Colorado's like if you're curious. But I had applied for jobs in California, didn't end up finding anything. So I'm starting in the October cohort of the emergency department in Fort Collins. I'm sorry, was there anything else that I should mention in this first?
That's great.
Okay. It's nice to see all of you and meet some
Hi everyone, I'm Anna. You probably do not know me at all. I graduated from the nursing program in 2019. I am originally from California and Bay Area. Brian and I actually discovered we are from the same place. And after college, I always knew that I had wanted to work in California post graduation. I wanted to live on the East Coast for a few years during school and then move back to be closer to family. And I am now working as a labor and delivery nurse in the San Francisco Bay Area. I live in San Francisco and work in Marin County, which is just north, in labor and delivery. I'm actually in between my night shifts right now. So if I sound a little groggy, I apologize to everyone. I woke up just a little early for this guy. I started off working in labor and delivery in Southern California in a smaller town because, like Ryan said, it's quite difficult to get that starting job out here. And it took me quite a while. I didn't even start working until October again of that same year. And I worked down there for about a year before I moved back up home to be closer with family after COVID. And I've been here ever since. So I've been a labor and delivery nurse for about 4 years now.
Great. And thank you
Anything
so
else?
much for sacrificing sleep for us tonight.
Yeah, just 1 hour. Well, I have my coffee. We'll do great.
Kimmy, if you don't mind.
Hi, can you guys hear me? Okay, great. I'm Kimmy. I'm actually also between night shifts right now, hence my tardiness and also why I'm standing outside. But I am originally from Chicago. Um, I was class of 2023, so just a year in front of Ryan. And I'm currently working in New York. I work at Morgan Stanley Children's Hospital, part of New York Presbyterian, and I'm on their pediatric cardiac ICU. Um, I started November 13th was my start date, so I'm a little bit under a year right now of work. I had decided that I had wanted to move to New York, kind of on a whim. I just didn't want to stay in DC necessarily and wasn't ready to go back to Chicago, which I do love so much. It's such a great city, but I was like, time to see one more city before I like end up back in the Midwest probably. Um, and so I ended up applying to jobs and not starting until mid-November. That's my start time. Um, and yeah, I knew the specialty. I knew I wanted to work in pediatrics. I always have wanted to work with kids and also spent my last year of nursing school in ICUs with the complex and then also my practicum. Um, and so then I found this job and that's where I've been for the past year or so.
Okay, thank you. Great. So I guess I'm wondering, I mean, you all talked about it sounds like you started in fall. I'm wondering at what point in your final year did you start applying for out-of-state positions? And if you can share, and I know for some of you it might be a little bit, but what the out-of-state recruitment looks like in terms of timelines and process, and if it's any different than what you know of in the Nova area, the DC area.
Do you want me to? I actually pulled up, I went through like my old emails and have my exact timeline. Would that be helpful to? Okay. So originally, like I said, I was looking at places in California. And unlike a lot of the DC, I'm not exactly sure what like Midwest or New York applications look like, but a lot of the California hospitals didn't open until like later in the spring of my senior year. And so I didn't actually apply to my first job until March of my senior year spring, which was a little bit stressful because a lot of people had been applying for jobs like well into the fall in the DC area, at least. Let me pull up what I had written down, but I I'd say I started seriously looking at the job applications. Probably I glanced at it in the fall and then I was looking more seriously in like January and applied to my first couple of rounds in March. I actually didn't hear back from any or I didn't get second rounds or anything at any places that first initial time. And a big part of that, from my perspective, like full disclosure, I did not have a nursing tech job at any point in my nursing career and hadn't worked as a CNA. I had some like healthcare experiences working for my county's public health department. But other than that, didn't really have. And so if there's any juniors or sophomores on this call, I'd say if you're looking at California, it would probably be helpful to have some type of tech job, especially if you want to go into, if there's a specialty that you want to go into. I found that the nature of job applications in California were just inherently competitive because it's a really desirable place to live. And therefore, a lot of people apply to those jobs. So I was looking at like 2,000, 3,000 people applying for like 20 to 30 spots in a hospital. So just like numbers game wasn't particularly in my favor. I had initially been interested in labor and delivery as a specialty, and I actually did my practicum there, which helped somewhat, but like also not entirely, because once I decided I wanted to switch, it was less transferable of skills, I guess, in a way. I ended up taking my NCLEX in early June. I think Jody, you might ask about this separately, but I can go into details on the timeline of that. I ended up applying for multiple rounds of jobs in all of California, ended up applying for the job that I ended up taking the position in, I'd say late July, early August. And once I decided to apply to Colorado hospitals instead of California, I actually heard back a bit quicker than California. And also, it was like real human beings emailing me, not like AI computer bots. So that was nice. But I'd say that the timeline you're looking at is probably for California, like spring for August/September cohorts. I even applied to a place in July for a September cohort. So that was about my timeline. And then yeah, my start date is October 28th, which is a little bit late, but I will say, and I know I'm sure Kimmy can attest to this, and then it sounded like Anna, you started a little bit later as well. When you're in school, it feels like everyone has a job and everyone is going to start in August. And that's natural because school starts in August. But it has been nothing but a blessing to start later in the year. It is so nice to just take some time and like really enjoy my summer and not rush into working, because we're going to be working for the rest of our lives. So might as well take some time right now.
Great. You mentioned California a lot, so I just want to hit go to Anna for a moment. What would anything be different in terms of the timeline for California?
No, I had a very similar experience. I remember kind of I can't remember what the class was, but I feel like there was a class spring semester where we kind of like started talking about applying for jobs, getting things together for the NCLEX, all of that. And I realized like other people were doing stuff. And I was like, oh, I should probably look into California because not a lot of the professors kind of had an idea of what to look for. So I remember doing a lot of research and like Ryan said, there was not a lot of applications open at the time. I feel like it does start later. The bigger hospitals of like the area have a classic, I think, spring, fall application period. If talking about like Stanford, UCSF, UCLA, those bigger hospitals. And then the other ones where you really kind of have to start doing your research because, again, they are very oversaturated with applications, nursing students in that area. You have to look at smaller places. And probably I had to really look in some maybe less desirable parts of California that I was not interested in living in, including kind of the Central Valley, areas like that, because a lot of people want to live and work there. And they have a lot of nursing students who will have legs up because they did their clinicals there. They know the people, they know the hospitals, and that makes a difference when applying and getting noticed by them. So I started looking into all of this I felt like it was like mid to late spring, and started working on stuff with the license application, which we can go into later. And over the summer, I was really just studying for my NCLEX and applying to every job I could find by Googling, which was just a lot of research into new grad programs. I joined Facebook groups. I really like went deep because it was hard to find places, and some places in the Bay Area where I live were not hiring new grads my year. For example, I come from a medical family too. Both of my parents work at UCSF Medical Center, which is a very large medical center in San Francisco. And that year they were not hiring new grad positions in labor and delivery, which is what I wanted. And I had done my practicum in mother baby, which also did not help my application process because, again, it is a little bit different. Like Ryan said, that practicum really does help market yourself. So it was hard for me to apply to other new grad jobs that were not within that area, as it, again, I wasn't very well trained in certain spots. And the local hospital that I work at now does not do new grad. They didn't do new grad programs at the time. Of course, they do them more frequently now that I am not looking for a job. But it just requires a lot of research into looking. And I mean, I applied to jobs as late as August. I believe the job I ended up interviewing for and accepting, I applied to in late August, and I did interviews and received the offer like mid-October to start in December. So it is kind of like an ongoing process. There's no like clear cut, all the applications will be in the spring for if you graduate in the spring, or all the applications will be in the fall if you graduate then. It's a lot of looking into a lot of Googling to find certain areas in smaller hospitals that are maybe hiring for new grads, but it's definitely a big effort to find them and get them, and also just get yourself noticed for even receiving an interview. Because again, it is a lot of applicants for very few spots, and you're already at a disadvantage if you don't have any connections to that area or those hospitals.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you for that. Kimmy, anything different that you would add for New York City?
I kind of echo all of the same things. I started had the same experience where like everyone is kind of looking for a job, and people who are staying around the DMV area can have like the connections to the hospital via the school, and there's like the fare and everything, which is really helpful. But I was basically kind of just like a little bit on my own, where there was a group of us that all wanted to go to New York, but everyone was just kind of reaching out to their own connections and like figuring out, just trying to apply. And so basically they had these applications open, I think even in my spring semester of senior year, but none that any of us were hearing back from. And so it would say something pretty vague like residency program or like new grad like program or something like that. And I submitted applications to all of them, and kind of like what Ryan was saying, would just get like responses back like, we will like let you know when we're hiring, or however they had responded. Um, and so then I graduated, went home, had submitted all of my forms to be licensed for New York without like having a position like following graduation, which honestly for out of state people, I think, especially hearing what Anna and Ryan are saying, I think is pretty like normal. And then it took me a very long time to get my NCLEX verification back, or whatever that form was, where they tell you that you're able to take the NCLEX finally. And up until this point, I had one interview with a hospital, and they basically flat out told me that I had not taken my NCLEX yet. I hadn't been verified by the state of New York, and they were not interested in hiring me until I had that. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. Awesome. I guess I'll keep waiting. And it was very anxiety inducing over the course of the summer, but basically ended up sending out like emails to different recruiters and trying to connect them via LinkedIn, and connect to nurses via LinkedIn and interview them, or do like an informal interview and just see like if their unit was hiring, which I thought was helpful. But honestly, the reason why I got my job was because I was a waitress for the summer at a place that I've been a waitress for my whole life. And one of my customers was a clinical instructor for NYU Langone, and one of her previous students, who she's still connected with, works on the infant cardiac ICU, which is like adjacent to the pediatric cardiac. And so she basically connected me to her. I talked to her. She connected me to a recruiter, and she told me a specific position to apply for, which was not the nurse grad or the new grad residency program. It was like something that I wouldn't have even thought to apply to, because I didn't think I would be qualified, because it was like clinical nurse 1 or clinical nurse 2. And it turns out that my unit had just been hiring this whole time. And I just hadn't known that I could have applied to that specific position. And it, like, having the reference was like something that like got me into being able to talk to a recruiter. So that was kind of really bizarre and frustrating, especially because I like had been stressed this entire time about getting a job. But I kind of think like specifically in my experience, I'm like, it'll all work out. Like once you have your NCLEX, once you're registered and you have your license, and like you are able, like we need nurses everywhere. My unit has not stopped hiring nurses since when I came on a year ago. And so I think it's just like more about getting your foot in the door than anything. I hope that answered the question, or maybe it was a little bit different.
No, that's perfect. Wow, waitressing. I am putting a link in the chat that is the best and worst states for nursing. So one of the factors on there is opportunities and competition. So California, I saw, was in the 20s, but you can check that out as well if you are looking and open to multiple states. We both, or all of you, have talked a little bit about like the resources and strategies you used. Anna, you talked about a Facebook group that you've joined. Kimmy, just waitressing, and also like LinkedIn and using that with recruiters. Any other resources or strategies that you used in your out-of-state job search?
I'd say that, to echo Anna, I think LinkedIn was very helpful. I think, Jody, you taught me how to particularly connect with alumni. I find that Georgetown alumni like runs deep. I literally just got like $800 off of a mattress because the guy selling it to me was a Georgetown grad. So like definitely use those connections. I would just like cold call message people on LinkedIn and say, hey, I'm a recent Georgetown nursing grad, or hey, I'm at school at Georgetown looking at your area. And just, you never know where a connection will lead to, whether they're working in a specific area of interest to you or not. I'd say like across multiple professions, like I talked to a couple PAs, I talked to some NPs, like a lot of people had a lot of very helpful and valuable information. I will say that like similar to Kimmy, a personal connection was helpful in this scenario with me, of just knowing someone that worked in the hospital system. And that didn't even really like help me a ton. It just gave me a person to contact who then passed my information to a recruiter who had already seen my application, and they were just able to like accelerate it slightly, just get your face in front of someone. um I think that it was also really helpful for me to talk to people who had done the process of applying to places in California specifically, just to get a sense of like what it looked like and if what I was experiencing was kind of like on par for the normal experience.
Um, I I feel like in terms of strategies, I had nothing going into it. I really winged almost everything I did because I didn't quite know what I was doing or what to look for. I didn't know anyone who had like applied to California recently. I used my parents as like helpful tools. They are in like, the medical world. So I tried to see if I could use connections from them, even just like around local places. But the places they had connections to either weren't hiring or that didn't even help a ton. Um, I think one thing to consider that I did not do is if it's something that's extremely important to you to immediately work in California and do that, is to try to even find something over the summer, probably ahead of your senior year if you're not already in it, to kind of get some sort of practice job like tech, something like a program at a local hospital, kind of get your face known to a certain area that you'd want to live and work in. I did not do that. I did kind of a different summer program out of state, something different. And so I had no connections to any of these hospitals that I was applying to versus other students that would have had connections. So something like that could be helpful if it's really important to you. But again, I think I think I looked for some summer programs around here, but they don't do, a lot of hospitals here don't do the easy kind of tech summer programs that I feel like hospitals in DC did, that I remember my friends and classmates doing that summer before senior year. Like my friend, I remember working as a tech at Children's, and a lot of my classmates did that as well. And it was very easy, like simple, like they have these jobs, a lot of Georgetown students do them. It was not the same in California. They didn't have kind of that accessibility for students of just doing like a summer quick job. So it might be something that is even difficult to find and access and to do, but it could be worth looking into if, again, it's really important to you to immediately work and live in California.
Also, really quickly on that note, I will say that a helpful piece of information that an alumni, she's like 30 years out of school, but something that she told me being on the other end of the hiring process, I'm sure it applies to other places, but specifically in California, just because it is such a desirable location and a very high cost of living, to in some form like express your commitment to live in California through your application, because she had said that they had trouble with some people like moving and working there and then just like not being able to support themselves in California. And so for me, it was like saying, oh, I'm from this area. Like I have family that like I'm living at home or like can help me out or something, just to establish that like you're not going to just get there and then after 6 months be like, this is too expensive, I can't live here.
And yeah, to jump off that, I never would have been able to go through the process I did, which was applying for jobs for 4 months and studying for the NCLEX and doing all that, if I was not living at home and being supported by my parents. It was an extremely privileged thing that I got to do doing that, especially for California. I mean, I live in one of the most expensive cities, and it is that expensive, and you are well compensated for it. It's not a lie that the Bay Area pays nurses the best pretty much in the entire country. But all of that would not have been possible without being supported by my parents here. I would not have been able to just live and do all of this because it felt like, I mean, it felt like a full-time job at the time. I know it's not, but studying and applying for all of these jobs and searching for the jobs every day felt like a full-time job. And without the privilege of being supported by my parents, it would have been extremely difficult to not have like work at the time and living here with its cost of living.
I also moved home after graduation and did the whole studying, like working, um, just like my summer job, and then being able to like get actually like registered as a nurse. And I think like that time leading up to like being able to take the NCLEX, like it was pretty quick moving afterwards of being like having my RN, that I was able to like get the job. And so it was kind of just like once I had done that, I had already expressed to the hospital who had like started to kind of interview me that I would be willing to move to New York like without a job. And that was the plan anyways, because I was just gonna move, get a job, like in whichever form it would end up being, whether it be nursing or not. And I think that also kind of to Ryan's point, like expressing that you're very committed to the place, just because I think a lot of people look up like where a nurse is best compensated or where the best hospitals to work at, where's the best cities. And like New York, California, those are all places that everyone wants to move to after graduation. Um, and so I think like showing my commitment in that way also was really helpful too, kind of to what Ryan's point was.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, let's move on to licensure. And I have one, maybe two questions, but if anybody has questions, please put them in the chat. So what was the process like for obtaining your nursing license in a new state? Were there any tips or challenges that these students should be aware of as they think about out-of-state licensure?
So I'd say, first of all, like, it's a stressful thing inherently, but like try not to stress about it so much, because honestly, I know that Kimmy had a different experience, but like for me, getting my license was so much easier than I had anticipated, because I was just like on the Reddit forums, like hearing about everyone like not getting their license for a year. And I was like, oh my God, California is so huge. But it actually, the process moved very quickly. I researched it before. It was like a lot of like text up on a really crappy website that was a little bit hard to understand in terms of the Board of Nursing of California. I ended up, so what you do in California is you have to submit this application through this platform called Breeze, and that is separate from the like Pearson View account. So you'll discuss this. Like Anna was saying, you have that class transitions in the spring, and they go into it a little bit, but you have this application through Pearson you have to apply for, and it's like $150 or something. And that's just like to get this thing called an ATT, which is approval to take the test. And so that includes like submitting all of your transcripts and your, gosh, I don't know what else. There you have to do a fingerprinting thing and maybe one other component also for California. And this was honestly the same in Colorado. It's better if you do the fingerprinting in the state that you're trying to get licensed in, because, for example, California has this function called live scan, and you just go to the UPS and like send in your form, and it's very streamlined. Whereas when I was living in California applying for Colorado, I had to go to the sheriff's office and get like manual ink fingerprints done. And that was just like a hassle. And like if it's the tiniest bit smudged, you have to get it redone. But just research what your state requires. And then once I submitted all that stuff, I put in through like it's not called Parchment anymore, but whatever the website is to submit your transcripts, you can do it so that it goes directly to someone else. So for California, you couldn't personally submit your transcripts. You had to do it through a like school verified platform. And so that was Parchment for me. And I asked Dr. Vatone, and she then asked like the registrar or something. After you graduate, it's like it takes about a week for your transcripts to be fully like official and ready. And so I just programmed it so that it would automatically, when they were released, send to the California Board of Nursing. And let me pull it up. I once I did that, I'd say that was late May. Yeah, so May 21st. I graduated May 17th. May 21st, I submitted my application for Breeze, the California platform. The 28th, I submitted my fingerprints. 29th, I did that Pearson account. And then on the 30th, I actually got an email from like a human being that worked at the Board of Nursing. And she said, hey, you just have to submit your transcripts. Something that was interesting was that for California, and I don't know if this is even required, but someone who had applied to be licensed in California had this issue. I had Dr. Fatone write up a letter saying that human bio was the equivalent of anatomy and physiology because for some reason I think California didn't like necessarily recognize that. And so I just like already knew that. So I had that with my application that I submitted. She got my transcripts on May like 30th. And then on June 6th was when I got my ATT. So I was able to schedule my test. And I actually like this was a point of concern for people in our cohort because people were like traveling after graduation. So they wanted to plan out like when they were studying. So I had a trip on June 16th and I had my ATT on June 6th. So I ended up taking the test on June 15th. So it really wasn't that long of a period of time to be studying, to be quite honest. But I felt comfortable. Georgetown really prepares you very well. And for the NCLEX at least, and something that was like gave me good peace of mind was knowing the fact that for the test, like it's not like a school exam where you need to get a certain percentage point right. Basically, you need to, this sounds terrible, but like you need to prove to the Board of Nursing that you are going to be an incompetent nurse for them to not license you. So they'll like keep testing you on questions that you're struggling with, or I don't know, just have like an algorithm to basically test when you've proved that you're competent. Um, and so then I found out my results like 2 or 3 days later. It was very quick. And I got my license number like that day. And I'd say the overall process of getting my license was a lot less stressful than I anticipated. And then for Colorado, this was kind of a bummer because I had initially wanted to only pay one fee and I ended up having to pay two because I I transferred. I did the license by endorsement. So there's either license by examination, which is take the NCLEX, or licensure by endorsement, which is you are already licensed in another state. You submit all your information to a new state, and then they just license you off of that. So for Colorado, I submitted that application on August 19th, submitted my manual fingerprints on August 25th, had to do like a background check, and then I got my Colorado license on September 6th. I know that was a lot of dates. I have it all written down. So if anyone needs like a visual of that, I'm happy to send it to Jody and she can send it out. But yeah, overall in both places, it was very like easier than I expected and also very easy to get in touch with a person that would be able to like talk me through the process.
Thanks, Ryan. Anna, you feverishly wanted to share something
Yeah.
Oh
about.
my God, no, I just, that whole,
The human
I wanted
bio.
to iterate that the human bio thing was
Yeah.
an issue for me, which I don't think many people knew about at the time. Maybe I started that knowledge. But they let me know that they needed like a written statement to prove that it was anatomy and physio. So I'm glad that that was mentioned. That was just something I feel like it reiterates how a lot of what I went through, there was a lot of silly details that caused like minor sags for me throughout the process. Just means I spent a lot of time calling the BRN in California. I had them on speed dial at that point because I had a lot of questions for them. Don't be afraid to call anyone or ask them questions if you're having any problems, because that's what they're there for. You might have to spend a little bit of time on hold, but it never hurts to call and ask. Since Ryan went through a lot of the California stuff, I won't go over a couple other details. It costs extra $50 if you go to a nursing school out of state. So you'll notice like there's a price for in-state nursing for California and out of state. A couple of the stuff with the out of state is just a little bit more complicated. Like she says, having to kind of send your transcripts through a second party, which versus if you're in a nursing school in California, they directly submit it to the California BRN. That fingerprinting, like she says, I thought I wasn't going to have time and I needed to do the out of state fingerprinting, which they call live scan versus the in-state. They recommend in-state because it's faster processing and just easier for you. The live scan, again, costs $49. And you need to go kind of like get it verified and then send through to California. And they say it just takes a little bit longer time to process. So it's just kind of like small things. And this was very odd. I don't know how it happened, but like when I applied, I don't know if that was true with you, Ryan. When I applied, since I had my address and everything was in California, they charged me as an in-state person for nursing school, even though there was nowhere on my application that said I went to school in California. And so I had to like send them extra money. But then I always find this very fun story I like to tell people was that I had paid for the live scan already, which was $49. And I didn't end up using it. But I still already paid for it. But the extra fee for an out-of-state nursing school is $50. So I owed them $1. And I mailed them a dollar bill to pay for that because they made me. They wouldn't just clear me for the single dollar. So I sent a whole dollar bill in the mail to them. So again, it was just a lot of a silly process that I was like one step after the other. I finally finished one thing and then I found out another thing that I had to kind of get done. But all in all, I don't know if it was processing times. I can't remember again because it was a little bit of time ago. I took my NCLEX in August. So there was a good month period where I think I had to call and kind of be like, oh, you guys processed it yet? What's going on? I was asking my coworker, oh, I'm so sorry. I can hear my parents' dog barking in the background. I was asking coworkers and friends for people who endorsed their out-of-state license to California. They do say it takes longer than other states. It's not as simple as other ones. The only extra steps, again, is doing that fingerprinting, that live scan. So if you are living somewhere else, you can do that. And then the processing time is just a little bit, and funny thing that she recommended to me was actually calling a local state representative for, she is a coworker who grew up in California. So she called like the local person she grew up in being like, hey, I really want to live and work in this area. Like, can you contact them? And she said the next day it went through. So just a silly kind of little tip that, especially if you know you're applying to a certain like city or area, you could call that person if it's taking a long time. Just, this is obviously a future thing because you still don't even have your regular license, but just small things in the process. But it is all very explicitly written out on the website to follow through. It just kind of takes a lot of organization.
Yeah, and I will say I didn't have that experience with needing to pay an extra fee, but on the California Board of Nursing, they have this website where it says like processing times. We are processing applications from April 10th through April 20th, and it will take 8 to 12 weeks. And I was like, oh my gosh, like 3 months, like that's a long time. And it didn't take nearly that long.
For me, so there is like kind of a similar thing where you apply for like the New York Board of Nursing. There's like an application through that, and it's all laid out through their website. It's like the professional nurses like tab on their website. And then after submitting that, you submit your transcript and things like that through the New York Board of Nursing page, and then you're basically waiting to get the ATT, which is what clears you to be able to take the NCLEX. And so I had submitted all of these things, and it does have an explicit part where it's like, please don't, like, it's either like resubmit or re-request, because it'll like make it take longer. And I think you maybe even get bumped back in a line of people like waiting to get approved. And that's explicit on their website too. And something about the transitions class is that like you'll have a day where you go through like what your state of interest is and what their requirements are. And you can like look to see like what the process would be like, just kind of get an idea. But then I honestly had a really tough time. Like my process was actually super anxiety inducing and draining, because I didn't get approved for, I had submitted all the proper paperwork and like during my senior year still during the spring, and hadn't heard back that I was approved to take the exam until, and I had heard nothing also. There was a complete radio silence from New York, for like up until maybe even September, um, or definitely beyond like either August or September. And um, that was crazy. And I would call the board of nursing and I would try to get through. I'd be on hold for like hours at a time because I'm like, I feel like everyone has gotten their ATT, but me at this point, even people in New York, and I'm not sure why. And I think it's just because it's really hard. Like I think it's a little unorganized, honestly. And I think it's hard to like get the correct paperwork through. And it's just kind of like whenever it happens, it happens. Um, and so I ended up getting the approval to test. And then immediately I had already like gone through all the proper steps with Pearson. Because you can do them simultaneously, but you can't take the test with Pearson until you have the ATT that you need to submit to them. And so then once I finally had the ATT for New York and I submitted it to Pearson, I think I took the test like 5 days later. And I had been kind of studying up until this point, but not really. And just kind of spent like those 5 days like doing like what are those like the Archer or
Archer was
yeah.
the Kimmy told me. Archer
I
review or something. It was pretty cheap and like
it
good.
was, and I just go through and I took a million practice questions and then took my exam. And heard back after that, like maybe like a day or two later. And after hearing back, then was able to then bring that to like the hospitals like websites and apply to the jobs with being able to confirm that I've like taken like the exam simultaneously while talking to a recruiter for my current position, who just I had been connected to like in like late July or early August. Um, but the whole process was definitely like very confusing, and I'd be happy to talk more about that. Like if anyone wants to talk to me separately, I can put my phone number and my email in. Unfortunately, I do have to run to my unit. Um, but please feel free to reach out to me with any questions that you guys have. I I've talked to some like current seniors, I think, and can do something similar to what Ryan's done, where she's outlined stuff. So if you have interest in New York, reach out to me, email, phone, whatever. But yeah.
Thank you. And thank you again for taking time. So this event is technically till 6:45, but if I'm sure, if anybody else has a question, you can always stay on and ask any question that you want. One quick question to wrap up while you're thinking about it. If you do have a question, in 15 seconds, Ryan and Anna, what do you wish you would have known before starting the job search process for this out-of-state job search?
15 seconds, got to make it quick. I guess pretty much everything that I discussed. I would also have loved to know how competitive the job application process was, specifically in California. Just because I spent a lot of months like thinking that I was crazy and that I was never going to get employed. And just know that that's not true. Like you definitely will. It will all work out. And then also just like the fact that it's totally fine to not be on the school semester timeline of starting in August. Like you can start whenever. It doesn't need to line up with when everyone goes back to school.
I see Kimmy's. Thank you. That's great. Kimmy, you're still on. You want to give us 15 seconds?
Yes. Yeah. I everything Ryan said. Ryan also was talking to me. I had been doing this the year before, and I was like, it's going to be okay. Honestly, give yourself the rest during the summer. Like being a student for like 20 years or however long when you graduate, like it is okay to not immediately jump into a career. And although everyone seems to be able to like get a job while they're still in school, or like people have things lined up from like their previous summer internship, It'll all work out. You'll find a job. If you really want to be in the place that you want to be, or that you're applying to and you're getting licensed in, commit to that and it'll work out. Like I didn't know that I was going to be able to work in New York, and it was kind of my only option because that's where I got my licensure for. And it just, because I had finally been licensed like through the NCLEX, it was like, okay, and now this ball can get rolling kind of thing. Um, but yeah, feel free to reach out to me. I'm gonna run. It was so lovely to see you all. And
Bye, Kimmy.
Thank you, Anna. Last but not least.
Yeah. Basically, I don't regret moving back to California and being near my family. It was something really important to me, and I really wanted to do it. But long story short, and this is not meant to sound discouraging in any way. I hope it's not. But if you've always wanted to live somewhere new, and California sounds appealing because of, it's beautiful. I love it here. I'm biased. But the salary, all that stuff, I get it because obviously I moved here and I did this. But honestly, I would consider the connections you have in DC, that metro area, or maybe even your hometown, and consider starting off there, getting your feet wet, growing your confidence, working for a year, and then applying to jobs out in California. It is a billion times easier to get a job once you have worked, even just for 1 year. I lasted, and even through all of this, I ended up getting a job in Southern California in a town called Ventura, and I had no friends or family there. My experience was deeply unfortunate because I started nursing in December of 2019, and we all know what happened a few months later. So I had no friends or family down there, and I worked there by myself for a year during COVID. And anyone who started the first year of your nursing career is one of the most stressful and anxiety-inducing times of your life. I just want everyone to know, and it's beautiful and crazy to do, but having friends and family support is very important. And I didn't have that. And there's something to say about maybe if I had waited a whole year and just been around friends and other classmates and used the easy connections I have to have my first nursing job and work for a year or two and then move to that area. If you want to go back to California or even just anywhere because that's where your family is, that's a different story. But I wish someone had told me again how competitive and how difficult it really was going to be in the end. And it might have not have looked so different just working in DC for a year. I hope that doesn't sound discouraging to anyone. But it's honestly what I wish someone had told me in the end.
And also, side note specifically about California, like something else that makes it desirable is there are really good laws and regulations that protect nurses. I will say that I had a professor tell me, like, maybe look at the East Coast to start out because you will build a really big skill set of making do with not much sometimes and being really overstaffed and overworked, which obviously is not a positive. And like the goal is that no hospital will treat you like that. But then if you then transfer to California as an experienced nurse, not only will you like have it an easier in to get a job there, but you also will have a more like sort of varied experience as a nurse that might lend itself well.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I was lucky the hospital I worked at my first year was it was different than the hospital I work in now. And I was able to gain a lot more experience and do different things that I wouldn't have done at the hospital I'm working at now, it's the reason you get paid so well in San Francisco Bay Area is because the unions here are incredibly strong. And they really work for you to get you good money. It's actually, the pay in the Bay Area is much better than it is in Southern California, which a lot of people I don't think don't realize or know. My pay jumped almost 2 times what it was when I was in Southern California to when I moved to the hospital I'm at now. I know that sounds crazy. There's a reason people live here, but it also, the cost of living is very exorbitant. But